Picture this moment. It's a Saturday morning in late September. You're drinking coffee on your porch and your neighbor slows his car down at the end of the driveway just to stare at your front yard. He doesn't wave. He doesn't smile. He just looks, because the flowers you planted years ago are now doing something his landscape has never done in 2 decades of trying. And here's what he doesn't know. You didn't hire a designer. You didn't spend thousands of dollars. You planted 11 perennials this April, and then you basically walked away. That's the secret the landscaping industry has been quietly hoping you never figure out. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which 11 plants to put in the ground this month, exactly where to place them, and exactly why they outperform every annual flower your local garden center is pushing at you right now. The sun is just starting to come up over the backyard. The grass is still wet, the air is cool enough to see your breath, and this is the hour when serious gardeners plant the first one. Plant number 1, Amsonia hubrichtii, sometimes called threadleaf blue star. Most homeowners have never heard this name in their entire lives, and that's exactly the point. The people who know about this plant are the ones whose yards stop you in your tracks in October. Amsonia hubrichtii is native to the Ouachita Mountains of Arkansas and Oklahoma, and the Missouri Botanical Garden documents it as hardy across zones 5 through 9. That covers almost every populated region of the continental United States, from New England down to northern Florida, across the entire Midwest, and all the way to the Pacific coast. Here's what makes this plant genuinely different from anything else in your yard. In late spring, it produces soft clusters of pale sky blue flowers that sit on top of the finest, most feathery foliage you will ever grow. The leaves look almost like green thread, but the real performance happens in October. When the nights turn cold, every single leaf on the plant shifts into a deep glowing golden yellow. Not brown, not tan, gold. The entire bush lights up like it's been plugged into a wall socket. And it does this with almost zero effort from you. Full sun to part shade, well-drained soil, and a drink of water during the hottest weeks of summer. That's the entire maintenance plan. No spraying, no staking, no deadheading. It grows into a rounded mound, about 3 feet tall and 3 feet wide, and it holds that shape for the next 20 years without you touching it. Place Amsonia hubrichtii in groups of 3, never one plant alone. Put them where the afternoon light will hit them from behind in October. A spot along your driveway edge works. The corner of your front walk works. Any place where a visitor's eye naturally lands as they approach your house. That's where this plant earns its keep. The morning light grows warmer now. The shadows shorten. A small breeze moves across the lawn, and the second plant catches it. Plant number 2, Baptisia australis, also known as blue false indigo. This is the plant that looks like it cost $500 and came from an old English estate, except it didn't. It came from American prairies, and it's been growing wild across the eastern United States for longer than this country has had a flag. Baptisia australis is a legume closely related to peas and beans, and that genetic history is exactly why it thrives where almost nothing else will. Its roots pull nitrogen directly out of the air and feed it into the surrounding soil. You are, without knowing it, planting a free fertilizer factory. Hardy across zones 3 through 9, Baptisia tolerates poor soil drought, heat, cold, and almost total neglect. It grows a deep taproot that sinks down 4 feet into the earth, which is why mature plants survive conditions that would kill anything else. The first year, you'll think you wasted your money. It'll look small. The second year, it fills out. By year 3, you have a shrub-sized presence covered in tall spikes of deep indigo blue flowers every May. Here's the part that makes serious gardeners love this plant. Once it's established, you cannot kill it. You could move to another state and come back a decade later, and your Baptisia would still be standing there bigger and more beautiful than the day you planted it. That's not an exaggeration. The Chicago Botanic Garden has documented specimens that have lived untouched for over 30 years. Plant Baptisia in full sun, give it space, and never try to transplant it after year 2. The taproot will not forgive you. Put it where you want it to live permanently, step back, and let it become the anchor of your landscape. Quick question before we keep going. Drop this in the comments right now. What's the one spot in your yard that has defeated you? The bare patch, the dry corner, the place where nothing you've ever planted has survived more than one summer. I want to read your answers because I'm telling you one of the next 9 plants on this list is the exact solution you've been missing. Type it below. The sun is higher now. The dew has burned off. You can hear a few bees starting to work, the early flowers, and the third plant is where the real color enters the yard. Plant number 3, Liatris spicata, called blazing star or gay feather. This is a Native American prairie plant that looks like nothing else in a residential landscape. Tall, perfectly vertical spikes, sometimes 3 feet high, covered in tiny purple flowers that open from the top down instead of the bottom up like almost every other flower on Earth. It's a small detail, but it's the reason the plant catches your eye from across the yard. The Missouri Botanical Garden documents Liatris spicata as native to the eastern United States and hardy across zones 3 through 8. That covers everything from Minnesota to Georgia, from Maine to Oklahoma. It thrives in full sun, tolerates poor and sandy soil, handles drought without complaint, and actually performs worse in rich, pampered conditions. This is a plant that wants to be ignored. But here's the real reason to plant Liatris, and it's a reason most gardeners underestimate. This plant is a pollinator magnet on a scale most flowers cannot match. Monarch butterflies, swallowtails, bumblebees, and hummingbirds all feed heavily on the purple spikes throughout July and August. Plant 1 clump, and within a week of blooming your yard will have more winged visitors than it's had in years. Plant 5 clumps, and you have a living, moving, buzzing piece of theater happening outside your kitchen window every single afternoon. Liatris grows from small corms that look almost like flattened onions. Plant them 3 inches deep in full sun in a spot with decent drainage. Space them about 12 inches apart in groups of 5 or 7, never in straight lines. Nature doesn't plant in rows, and neither should you. Within their first summer, they'll send up those tall purple spikes and begin the show that will repeat every single July for the rest of your life in that house. The morning settles into a warm, quiet stillness. The grass is dry now. The first real heat of the day is starting to build, and the 4th plant is one that handles that heat better than almost anything else. Plant number 4, Coreopsis verticillata Moonbeam, commonly called threadleaf Coreopsis. If you've ever walked through a well-designed garden and wondered why it looked so calm and cohesive instead of busy and chaotic, there's a good chance Moonbeam was part of the answer. The Missouri Botanical Garden classifies this variety as hardy across zones 3 through 9, which is essentially the entire United States outside of extreme southern Florida and the coldest corners of Alaska. It's been given the Perennial Plant of the Year award and has been a landscape designer favorite for over 30 years. Moonbeam produces soft, pale yellow daisy-like flowers that are neither loud nor demanding. They don't scream for attention. What they do is glow. The pale color reflects light differently than brighter yellows, which is why this plant looks particularly beautiful in the long golden hour of late afternoon. The foliage itself is fine and feathery, almost like dill, giving the plant a soft cloud-like texture even before it blooms. Here's what sets Moonbeam apart from the common yellow perennials your neighbors are growing. It blooms from early June all the way through the first hard frost in October. 4 straight months of non-stop color with almost no intervention. Give it full sun, well-drained soil, and 1 light shearing in midsummer to encourage a second wave of flowers, and it will outperform every annual marigold or petunia your garden center is trying to sell you this spring at a fraction of the azare. Lifetime cost. Place Moonbeam along the front edge of your garden beds, where its softness can spill gently onto the walkway or lawn. Use it in drifts of 5 to 7 plants, never as a single specimen. It's a supporting actor that makes every other plant in the bed look better, and that's exactly why serious designers use it in almost every project. The sun is almost directly overhead now. The shadows are short and sharp, and the 5th plant is one that turns a residential garden into something that looks professionally designed overnight. Plant number 5, Salvia Caradonna. This is the plant that separates yards that look nice from yards that look intentional. Caradonna has almost black, deeply pigmented stems rising straight up, each one topped with a dense spike of violet-blue flowers. The contrast between the dark stem and the purple bloom is so strong that from 20 feet away, the plant looks like it was drawn with ink. Nothing else in a common garden has this kind of graphic presence. It's hardy across zones 4 through 8, loves full sun, tolerates drought exceptionally well once established, and blooms heavily from May through early July. Shear it back by half after the first flush, and it will rebloom lightly through September. The leaves are slightly fragrant when brushed, which means pulling a few weeds nearby becomes a small sensory experience you didn't know you signed up for. Now, I want to pause for just a moment here because I was talking to my neighbor about this exact plant last weekend. He's been married for 31 years, and he told me completely straight-faced that the one thing that has kept his marriage alive through 3 decades is that his wife controls the flower beds and he controls absolutely nothing else in the entire house. He said he used to argue about it. Then he realized the yard was the only place he was still allowed to have an opinion. He looked at his salvia, looked at me and said, quote, "She lets me pick the purple ones. That's the whole deal," end quote. That is marriage in the suburbs, explained in one sentence. Anyway, back to the plant. Place Caradonna in groups of 5 to 9 in full sun. Pair it with yellow moonbeam Coreopsis for one of the most classic color combinations in all of perennial gardening. Purple against yellow is a contrast that never goes out of style, and together these two plants will carry your front bed from May until October with almost no effort. The afternoon light begins to soften now. The sky turns a deeper blue. The 6th plant is one that most gardeners have been told to avoid, and every single thing they've been told about it is wrong. Plant number 6, Solidago rugosa fireworks, commonly called goldenrod. For generations, Americans have blamed goldenrod for their late summer allergies, which is one of the biggest botanical injustices in the history of this country. Goldenrod does not cause hay fever. The actual culprit is ragweed, which blooms at exactly the same time but has tiny wind-pollinated green flowers that nobody notices. Goldenrod, meanwhile, has bright yellow insect-pollinated flowers that are too heavy to travel through the air. Its pollen physically cannot reach your sinuses. The plant has been taking the blame for its neighbor's crime for over 100 years. Fireworks is a cultivated variety that has earned the Plant of Merit designation from the Missouri Botanical Garden. It's hardy across zones 4 through 8, and it produces arching sprays of brilliant golden yellow flowers in late August and September, exactly when your summer perennials are starting to fade. The name is literal. The bloom clusters look like yellow fireworks exploding horizontally from the center of the plant. Nothing else in your yard will be doing anything remotely this dramatic at that time of year. More importantly, fireworks is one of the most valuable late-season pollinator plants in North America. Monarch butterflies, preparing for their migration to Mexico, feed heavily on goldenrod nectar to build the fat reserves they need to survive the journey. Native bees, honeybees, and dozens of other beneficial insects rely on it as one of the last major food sources before winter. Planting goldenrod is one of the most meaningful small acts of conservation a homeowner in America can perform. Give it full sun average soil and plenty of room to grow into a clump about 3 feet tall and 3 feet wide. Place it toward the back of your beds, where its late-season color can light up the garden just as everything else is winding down. The afternoon deepens into a rich, slow gold. The shadows stretch long across the lawn, and the 7th plant is one that adds structure and presence to any space. Plant number 7, Pye Weed Little Joe. The name sounds like something out of a country song, and the plant itself has that same honest American character. The full-sized variety of Pye weed can grow 7 feet tall, which is too much for most suburban yards. Little Joe is the solution. It tops out at 3 to 4 feet, holds the same dusty rose-pink flower heads. The big one is famous for and fits comfortably into a residential border. It's hardy across zones 3 through 9, which covers almost the entire country, and it blooms from late July into September, when most other perennials have already given up. The flower heads are massive, sometimes 8 inches across, shaped like flat-topped domes that butterflies land on the way they'd land on a helipad. On a sunny August afternoon, a mature Little Joe will have half a dozen eastern tiger swallowtails and monarchs feeding at the same time. It's not unusual. It's the normal daily experience of owning this plant. Little Joe prefers moist soil and full sun to part shade, making it one of the few statement perennials that performs beautifully in the low damp areas of a yard where drainage is imperfect. If you have a spot that stays slightly wet after heavy rain, this plant will thrive there while everything else struggles. Now, if you've made it this far into the video and you haven't subscribed yet, I need to ask you something simple. You've already spent this much time with me, which means you're serious about making your yard better. I've just handed you 7 plants that most of your neighbors will never hear about, and there are 4 more coming, including the final one that is genuinely the most beautiful. This channel exists specifically to deliver this kind of information to people who actually care. Hit subscribe. It costs nothing. It takes 1 second, and it makes sure the next video reaches you when it drops. The sun is low in the west now. The yard fills with that long, warm, honey-colored light that only happens an hour before sunset. The 8th plant is one that adds real permanent structure. Plant number 8, Virginia Sweetspire Little Henry. Most homeowners never plant a flowering shrub, which is one of the quiet reasons average American yards look so flat and monotonous. A shrub adds weight, presence, and year-round shape that no perennial can match. Little Henry is a compact native shrub that gives you all of that in a package small enough for any yard. The Missouri Botanical Garden documents it as hardy across zones 5 through 9, growing about 3 feet tall and 4 feet wide at full size. In late spring, it produces drooping white flower spikes that look almost like small bottle brushes, and every single spike releases a light honey-like fragrance that carries on an evening breeze. In October, the foliage turns a spectacular deep red, purple, and orange all at once, often holding that color until late November in milder zones. What makes Little Henry genuinely useful is its tolerance for wet soil. Most shrubs rot in damp conditions. Virginia Sweetspire evolved along stream banks and bottomland forests in the American Southeast, which means it actually prefers the kind of wet spot that kills other plants. If you have a low corner of your yard where water tends to collect this, shrub solves that problem permanently while looking beautiful doing it. Plant it in groups of 3 or 5 along a walkway at the corner of your house or as a low hedge along a property line. Full sun gives the best fall color, but it tolerates part shade well. The light turns copper now. The first shadows of evening stretch out. The 9th plant brings a darker, richer note to the garden. Plant number 9, Ninebark Diabolo. This is the shrub that gives a yard genuine sophistication. Diabolo has deep burgundy, almost black leaves that hold their color from spring through fall, providing constant contrast against everything green around it. In June, it produces clusters of small pinkish-white flowers that look like tiny cream-colored cauliflowers against the dark foliage. Those flowers mature into red seed capsules in late summer, and the bark itself peels in winter to reveal layers of brown and gray, giving the plant something called winter interest, which is landscape designer language for a plant that still looks alive when everything else looks dead. Hardy across zones 3 through 7, Ninebark tolerates clay, soil, drought, cold, and urban conditions that would kill most shrubs. It reaches about 8 to 10 feet tall and wide at full maturity, which makes it ideal as a large accent shrub, a screening hedge, or a bold backdrop for smaller perennials in front of it. The dark foliage does something almost no other common shrub can do. It makes every flower planted near it look brighter. A pale yellow moonbeam Coreopsis planted in front of a Diabolo Ninebark looks like it's glowing. A purple Caradonna salvia against dark burgundy leaves becomes electric. This is a design trick that professional landscape architects charge thousands of dollars to execute, and you can reproduce the entire effect for about $30 at a local nursery. Plant it in full sun for the richest leaf color. Give it space to grow into its full size and prune it only lightly in early spring if needed. The sky turns amber and rose, the first stars begin to appear over the horizon, and the 10th plant is one that performs in the hardest season of all. Plant number 10, Anemone Honorine Jobert, called Japanese anemone. This is the plant for people who want elegance without effort. The Missouri Botanical Garden has designated Honorine Jobert a plant of merit, and it's hardy across zones 4 through 8. From late August through October, long after almost every other perennial has finished, this plant sends up tall, slender stems, sometimes 3 to 4 feet high, each one topped with a single pure white flower with a ring of golden yellow. Stamens at the center. The blooms sway in the slightest breeze, creating a kind of quiet motion that almost no other flower produces. It thrives in part shade, which is exactly the condition most homeowners struggle to fill beautifully. The dappled light under a mature tree, the north side of a house, the edge of a woodland border. These are the spots where Honorine Jobert does its best work. Full shade is too dark. Full afternoon sun in hot climates is too harsh. But the half-light zones of a typical American yard, the spots where nothing else seems to bloom well, are exactly where this plant shines. The flowers last for weeks, often into the first light frosts of fall. The timing matters. When your yard is starting to shut down for the year, when the leaves are beginning to turn and the air has that first cold edge, Honorine Jobert is still blooming, still white, still calm, still elegant. It extends your garden season by nearly a full month at a time when almost nothing else can. Planted in groups of 3 to 5 in moist, rich soil. Give it partial shade, especially protection from hot afternoon sun. Once established, it spreads slowly through rhizomes, gradually forming a drift that looks like it was always meant to be there. The first cool air of evening settles over the yard. The light turns violet, and the 11th plant is the one that turns your garden into something you will never forget. Plant number 11, New England Aster Purple Dome. The full-sized New England aster can grow 5 feet tall and flop over in a summer storm, which is why most gardeners give up on it. Purple Dome is the solution. The Missouri Botanical Garden documents this compact variety as a sturdier, shorter, more garden-friendly form that reaches only 18 to 24 inches tall, holds itself upright without staking, and blooms from late August through early October. The flowers are a deep saturated royal purple with golden yellow centers, and when they open in full sun on a September morning, the effect is almost unreal. A mature purple dome covered in blooms looks like someone poured a bucket of purple light onto your garden. But here's what makes this plant genuinely special, and why I saved it for the end. Monarch butterflies migrating south to their overwintering grounds in central Mexico rely on late-blooming asters as one of the last critical nectar sources before they cross thousands of miles of open country. A single purple dome in full bloom in September will be covered in monarchs, sometimes a dozen at a time, their orange and black wings opening and closing slowly as they feed. You will stand at your kitchen window and watch it happen, and you will realize that the small decision you made one April morning years ago has become a way station on a migration route that has existed since long before any of us were born. That is what a garden is supposed to do. Not just look pretty, connect you to something larger than yourself. A single plant, a living creature halfway through a journey most humans will never understand, and a quiet moment where you get to witness it from your own backyard. Hardy across zones 4 through 8, Purple Dome thrives in full sun and average soil. Planted in groups of 3 or more at the front of a bed where the monarchs can find it easily and where you can sit close enough to watch them work. Now here is how all 11 of these plants come together into something greater than any single one of them. Your back border, the tallest layer, anchors the yard with Pye Weed, Goldenrod Fireworks, and Ninebark Diabolo. These are your architecture, the bones that give the garden structure and height. Your middle layer, the heart of the bed, carries Baptisia, Liatris, Salvia Caradonna, Japanese Anemone, and Amsonia hubrichtii. This is where the color and the movement live, where bees and butterflies work from May through October. Your front edge, the softest layer, spills forward with Moonbeam Coreopsis Purple Dome Aster and Virginia Sweetspire Little Henry. These are the plants that greet you first, that soften the lines of your walkways, that pull the eye downward from the taller plants behind them. 3 layers, 11 plants, one continuous living performance that starts in May and does not stop until the first hard freeze of November. And then, in the quiet of winter, the seed heads of the Baptisia, the bleached spikes of the Liatris, and the peeling bark of the Ninebark carry the visual interest straight through to the next spring when the whole cycle begins again. If you're watching this in your 40s, 50s, or 60s, and you've spent years planting annuals every May and watching them die every October, this is the year to stop. You have earned a garden that takes care of itself. You have earned the quiet satisfaction of walking out your back door in September and watching a monarch butterfly feed on a flower you planted with your own hands. You have earned a yard that gets better every single year without asking more of you than you have to give. So tell me in the comments, which of these 11 plants are you putting in the ground this April? And if you've ever grown any of them before, tell me what happened. Tell me the failures, the surprises, the moment a butterfly landed on something you planted and you realized the whole thing was working. Your story helps every other person watching this video. Subscribe to this channel. It's free. Every week, I'll keep delivering exactly this kind of information for people who want more from their yard and their time and their life. The deepest lesson inside perennial gardening is not about flowers. It is about time. Most American homeowners spend every single May buying annuals, planting them, watering them, watching them die in October, and doing the exact same thing the following year. That cycle is not gardening. That is renting color. Perennials are ownership. When you plant Baptisia australis in April, you are making a decision that will still be producing flowers 20 years from now. The plant will outlive your lawnmower. It will outlive your roof. In many cases, it will still be there when the next family moves in. That is a different relationship with the land than most people ever experience, and it changes how you think about your yard, your time, and your money. The first real lesson is patience. A perennial looks small in year 1. It looks modest in year 2. It does not become itself until year 3. Almost every homeowner who fails at perennial gardening fails because they quit at month 6. The plant has not failed. The gardener has misunderstood the timeline. Once you accept that a Baptisia or an Amsonia hubrichtii is building its root system underground long before it performs above ground, you stop measuring success by this weekend and start measuring it by this decade. The second lesson is restraint. New gardeners want every plant to bloom all summer in every color at once. Experienced gardeners design in waves. Salvia Caradonna carries May and June. Coreopsis Moonbeam holds the middle of summer. Liatris and Pye Weed take over July and August. Goldenrod Fireworks and Purple Dome Aster close the season in September and October. Nothing blooms constantly. Everything blooms in turn. This is how nature actually works, and learning to design with that rhythm instead of fighting it is the single largest leap a homeowner can make. The third lesson is about pollinators, and this one matters beyond your own yard. When you plant native perennials like Liatris, Joe, Pye Weed, Goldenrod, and New England Aster, you are not just decorating your property. You are participating in something much older. The monarch butterfly migration from Canada to central Mexico has existed for thousands of years, and it depends entirely on a broken chain of nectar sources across North America. Every yard that plants late-blooming native asters becomes a link in that chain. One homeowner cannot save a species. 1 million homeowners each planting 3 purple domes absolutely can. The fourth lesson is humility. You are not in control of your garden. The weather, the soil, the rain, the deer, the voles, the late frost in April, none of these answer to you. The gardener who succeeds is the one who chooses plants tough enough to survive the conditions they have, rather than fighting for conditions they do not. Baptisia tolerates poor soil. Ninebark tolerates clay. Virginia Sweetspire tolerates wet spots. Choose plants that match your reality, and the garden almost grows itself. The final lesson is the quietest one. A garden teaches you that the most meaningful things in life rarely happen fast. You plant something in April, you wait, you forget about it, and then one September morning years later, you walk outside with a cup of coffee and a monarch butterfly is feeding on a flower you planted with your own hands, and you realize that small, patient decisions made years ago are what built the life you are standing in right now.